go live button, which means we are going to be waiting for the stream to fire up all across the fruited plains of the internet. Then we can go ahead and get started. Let's make sure that the stream is alive and well. We are checking in on Facebook and Twitter and on Rumble. Looks like that's alive. But YouTube is always the one that takes a quick minute for us to get started. And let's go ahead and rock and roll because it looks like we're alive and well, my friends. So let's get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a little thing called justice. And it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and me to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. That's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. And we're grateful that you are here and with us today because we've got a lot to get into. We missed the show on Friday. Oh, how painful it was, my friends. But I was out in court 3.5 hours away. And so we got a little bit of catching up to do here today. So let me give you an agenda, a run through about what is on the program. We're going to start off by talking about the bipartisan infrastructure bill because the Senate now, there's a bipartisan agreement between the Republicans and the Democrats. Maybe this is the unity that they're talking about, but they've got a $1.2 trillion bill. They just opened debate on it in the Senate today. And so we're going to go through the bill. It's very, very big, 2,702 pages. We are not going to spend the show going through all of it. We're just going to look at the table of contents. And I'll tell you, you'll probably have read more of this bill than any of our other senators in our government. So we're going to go through that. We're also going to check in with President Biden, Vice President Harris, and some of the other Biden administrators or people in the administration. Get some of their reaction. What do they think about this thing? Then we're going to change gears and we're going to talk about what's going on with Donald Trump. You may have seen this story over the weekend. The Office of Legal Counsel came out and they are telling us that the Department of Justice can release through the IRS Donald Trump's tax records. Send that over to the Democrats in Congress because, well, there's a legitimate basis for this. Now, according to Johnsen is the head of the Office of Legal Counsel. We talked about her previously. Remember, we talked about her. She was the one who said that it was okay for experimental vaccines to be mandated. And she sort of twisted herself in a pretzel to come to that conclusion. She did it again for Donald Trump's taxes. So we're going to spend some time going through there as well. And then lastly, we got to talk a little bit more about the Biden crime wave, which is continuing to percolate throughout the country. We're going to check in with Washington, D.C., Chicago, as well as Portland, because they're in a little bit of hot water. They've got all these shootings and all these violent crimes that are taking place throughout their cities. And they can't find any police officers. Ugh, they defunded the police. And so now they're kind of missing police. Go figure. So we're going to talk about that story and more. If you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And I'm taking a look at the chat right now. And yeah, you know, there's some moderation going on now at our watchingthewatchers.locals.com community. Because we need to enforce dinner table rules over there and have productive conversations. So I'll make sure that we deal with that after the show. But also over on YouTube, we've got several people over there chatting away. Big shout outs to Joel, John Dole, Joel Rowley's in the house playing hooky. I see Thunder7 and many others who are all chatting away. And so if you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that is at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, where you can use this form where you can ask a question. So you can ask a question here, and we're going to go ahead and get those questions answered and do our very best to get them as we continue on with the program today. So without any further ado, let's make sure that everything is rocking and rolling. Then we can get into the show. All right. a bipartisan infrastructure deal. It's working its way through Congress. And so some people hear the word bipartisan and they're very excited. They like it. They say, oh my goodness, we're all getting along now. The Republicans, the Democrats, they're going to come together, join hands, sing kumbaya around the campfire, and then suddenly they're going to come to a consensus about what needs to happen politically, policy-wise, in our government. And so that's taking place right now. It's very, very poetic. It's very, very nice. Joe Biden's vision of unity in America is coming true. And so that's one side. The other side is people like me. We go, oh, great. So now they're in cahoots. They're in total agreement that they're going to ram something that we don't like down our throats. Anytime that they're sort of in unanimity on these things, you can better bet it's going to be awful and terrible. And so we're going to talk about it. We're going to jump off with a headline over from the AP. Says that an infrastructure debate finally opens in the Senate now, over $1 trillion. This was just posted an hour ago. I'm clipping this stuff sort of in real time because the debate is taking place literally right now. The Senate is still in session and they're going to be trying to cram through this bill. Senate Majority Leader ChuckUSchumer is now trying to speed up consideration. $1 trillion bill, saying that Democrats are going to work with Republicans to put together amendments. GOP senators said, yeah, well, we need time to digest the massive bill. It's formally called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The proposal clocked in 2,700 pages, my friends. Very, very big bill. Came in late on Sunday, so if you were out there barbecuing with your friends and family, you may have missed it. Hurry up and wait. Rare weekend session. They do this stuff at the last minute because they don't want you to know what's in the bill. 2,700 pages. They're going to try to cram it through this week. Schumer said a final vote could be held in, quote, just a matter of days. So you have to ask yourself, right, if we're looking at this bill, it's 2,702 pages, and they're going to pass it in a couple days. So that means, like, what do they read? It came out late Sunday. So if you're a senator and you're just reading, well, what do you, 3 days, you've got what? 800, 900 pages. If you're really hustling, maybe 1,000 pages a day, you can get that thing done in under 3 days. Wow, that's pretty good. If you're a senator, now I'm not as intelligent as a lot of the other senators out there, so maybe they can read a lot faster than I could, but a 2,700 page book would take me more than 3 or 4 days to get through it meaningfully. The question is, are they going to read it with any meaning? Probably not. Senate Majority Leader Schumer said, quote, let's start voting on amendments. The longer it takes to finish the bill, the longer we're going to be here. Nobody wants to be in the Senate for too long, especially Chuck Schumer. A key part of Biden's agenda, the bipartisan bill in the first phase of his infrastructure plan, calls for $550 billion new spending over 5 years for all sorts of different stuff. We're going to look at it. Things like roads and bridges and waterworks and broadband and electric grid. And so, you take a look at this stuff and you say, oh, good. Yeah, good. Broadband, that's good. Waterworks, okay, good. Electric grid and roads and bridges, that's all well and good. But you may recall that we've already been spending something like several trillion. Remember, a trillion here, 900 billion here, and the list just goes on and on. And so it's sort of another expense that many people are sort of tired of paying. So let's take a look at what is actually in the bill. As I mentioned, this is 2,702 pages. This is what the top of it looks like. You can see a number of different amendments are going to be working their way through. We got Miss Sinema over here. We have Mr. Portman, Mr. Manchin, Cassidy's in the House, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, Mr. Romney's in the House, Miss Collins, of course, right? These are all of the Republicans that are going to have to jump over, cross the aisle a little bit. This is bipartisan. This is unity. And so we've got, a lot of Republicans here who are going to be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem, if you take their word for it. So it's the usual suspects, right? All of the squishy Republicans that we call them here on the show. Romney, Collins, Murkowski. Sinema's a Democrat. We've got, those are really the big three. And the Republicans are not in control of the Senate, right? The Democrats are. So they just need a couple of them to come on board, and then they'll be able to ram this thing down your throat. Joe Biden's very excited about this. He says, listen, folks, the bottom line is this. Bipartisan infrastructure deal is a blue-collar blueprint to rebuild America that's going to help our historic economic recovery, a long-term boom. So he's very excited about it. And he's talking big picture, like big picture, historic economic recovery, long-term boom. We'll see. A lot of people have some doubts about where this is going, but Joe Biden's very excited about it. Kamala Harris now, She's talking about jobs and lead pipes. So that's where she's coming from. So bipartisan infrastructure deal is going to create jobs, replace our nation's lead pipes. That means clean drinking water for millions of families. That's good. I don't disagree with clean drinking water. I think that's a good thing. Also, it's going to create jobs. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of jobs out there. It's kind of difficult to find the employees. So she's going to be creating more jobs. There's, I think, a lack of employees for many small businesses. But okay, so Kamala's on top of it. And I'm really excited that she's working on this infrastructure thing because she's going to do as good a job as she did on the southern border. So we're excited about that. We got the Secretary of Transportation over here. Pete Buttigieg is in the House, says that the president is keeping his promises to fix our infrastructure. He's going to work across the aisle to do so. He says it's an extraordinary opportunity for our communities and our democracy. All right. We got Klobuchar over here, says so much hard work, dedication, and effort has gone into this package. It's going to expand broadband, clean drinking water, repair our bridges, and so much more. Let's get it across the finish line. And so, at this point, you sort of ask yourself, you have to sort of reduce this down to the most pertinent question that many of us has. What is the role of government? What is government supposed to be doing? Are they supposed to be expanding broadband and providing clean drinking water and repairing our bridges? Many people say, yeah, because these are sort of the tried and true infrastructure, components of government, the stuff that is too big for the private sector for people to do individually for themselves. That's when you bring the government in. So for example, right? It's hard for a state to build a national military because it's just one state. Arizona can't really do that. California can't really do that. We can build our own National Guards and our own different law enforcement agencies, but to be able to provide for the defense of an entire nation, you say, well, that's kind of a government thing. So you might want to take that out and say, okay, the military is what the government does. Same thing with stuff like immigration. You might say, well, the government is responsible, the federal government, for protecting the borders. And so maybe an infrastructure package there that might be justified would be something like a border wall, which has sort of been defunded. But then you look at other things like drinking water and repairing our bridges, and you sort of ask yourself, right, is that a federal responsibility? Are the feds competent enough to go into every little community and make sure that everybody's got clean drinking water? Or is that something that should be left to the communities? Should the federal government be repairing the bridges, or should that be something that's left for local government? Same with broadband and some of these things. Or is this the federal government encroaching into these different sectors so that they can sort of replace some of the private sector support that might be in that industry, in that locality? So you can have a lot of debates about this. A different representative, Ken Buck over here, says the bill is 2,700 pages long, costs $1.2 trillion. Senate released it last night, wants to pass it this week. How is this reasonable? He says. Right, very good question. Very good question. And when you go through the bill, you're going to see there's a lot in here. I did a quick search of a couple different terms that are floating around in this thing. If you take a look at the word school, right, you're going to see it's in there. 2,702 pages. The word school was mentioned 218 times. So a lot of school stuff, a lot of water stuff, 779 different entries for water. We also have bridge 131 times and road 900 times. So some pretty big numbers in there, right? For the stuff that you might expect. Things like schools, waters, bridges, and roads, which is what they're all excited about. Some other language that you kind of see snuck in here a little bit. Well, we got the word equity, lot of equity in here. And remember, equity was sort of the new buzzword that we just heard. At least it became more popular, more pertinent during the Biden administration and really during the last campaign. Remember, we started to see the difference between the word equality and the word equity. Equality meaning that sort of everybody has, the same starting points and that everybody can, go out into the world and mix their labor with the world and their resources and create what would be the fruits of their labor. That would be something that they could receive and enjoy. Now you compare and contrast that to equity, which means it doesn't really matter where you started. We're going to make sure that essentially everybody's crossing the finish line at the same time. Doesn't matter how fast you ran or how much exercise you did to condition yourself for that race. We want to make sure that everything is equitable as we cross that line. And so a lot of people start to see that and they say, oh, well, that very clearly sounds like a redistribution. We're going to take from some segments of society and redistribute those to other segments of society. And it starts to raise some concerns. And that word is in there a lot. In fact, they have a whole section of this bill that we're going to see that is sort of the Digital Equity Act. Okay, so a lot is going on in here. Police is also in here 3 times, not as much as I was expecting, but they are certainly in here. We have coronavirus, that word popped up 14 times in here. The word race is also in here 9 times. Tax, 94 times. A lot of that has to do with some tax evasion and things like that. Gender identity is defined, or it's referencing a different part of the U.S. Code, 2 times in this document. Law enforcement is in here 16 times. And the word court is in here 22 times, right? And so those are just some of the words that I was toying around with. And you can certainly spend some time going through this bill. There's 2,700 pages and dig into it. We're not going to do that. Let me run through the table of contents. And there's like 15 to 20 slides of this. We're not going to go through it all, but I just want to show you the size of this thing. We're only looking at the table of contents. Let's take a look here. Title 1, federal aid for highways. A lot of stuff for highways. Let's see what's going on in here. Authorization and programs for just highways. This is all for highways. So we've got toll roads, Alaska highways, congestion mitigation, air quality improvement programs, probably a few billion for that. Public transportation, we got bicycle stuff. Let's see what else. Work zone, process review, a lot's going on there. And it just keeps going. More transportation. We got climate change. So we have grants for charging and fueling infrastructure. We got a carbon reduction program, a congestion relief program, all going to be funded by this new infrastructure bill. Different miscellaneous things like Buy America, which is a good talking point. Bridge terminology, got to define that. We got research technology now. This is for transportation and infrastructure. We got a section for Indian Affairs, multimodal and freight transportation. Big transportation bill. You can see a lot of rail here, a lot of Amtrak reforms. So improved oversight of Amtrak accounting, improved oversight of Amtrak spending, okay? An Amtrak smoking policy. The federal government needs to be involved in that. Creating quality jobs, enhancing cross-border service, all of that. All right, so that's all in rails. We got motor carrier stuff, right? So this is for trucking, underwriting, protection, providers of recreational activities. Oh, we have a limousine research section here. So the federal government is going to be funding some limousine research, just so length and comforts and probably some carbon equity stuff going on there as well. So some limousine research is going to be going on in this bill. What else do we have? Highway and motor vehicle safety. We got research and innovation. Let's see what we're going to be innovating on with our research. How about this? Strengthening mobility and revolutionizing transportation. Okay, so doesn't really say anything there. Local hiring, hazardous materials. All right, nothing much substantive there. How about this? We have sport fish restoration. Okay, bus testing facilities, definitely need more of those. We should. It's like a grocery store list. Let's see what we got for energy here. Sweetie, can you get some more state energy security plans? Yep, and the state energy program. Sure, honey, I'll get some of those for you. How about the Columbia Basin Power Management? Those are on aisle 7. So cybersecurity's here. We have the cybersecurity plan, enhanced grid security. So they've done a pretty terrible job of this, so maybe that money will be useful for something. I'm going to guess not. We got supply chain management. We got some hydrogen research. Oh, this is good. Carbon utilization programs, carbon capture technology, carbon dioxide transportation, all going on here. Hydropower, which is good stuff. Energy infrastructure. Look, folks, it just keeps going. I honestly can't even make a show of this. What am I talking? Look at this. It just keeps going. Methane reduction infrastructure. So that's good. Probably a few billion for that. Abandoned mine reclamation. That's good. So abandoned mine reclamation fees. So we have a bunch of mines that are abandoned apparently. And so, okay. Wildlife. All right. So, you know how these things go is it's the most boring thing to talk about on a show. And what ends up happening is I go through this and I rip on something and then somebody's going to send me an email and say, hey, that's very important. That's my job right there. So I don't want to offend anybody. There are people who are watching this going, hey, that's mine. That's my line item. I need that. I have an abandoned mine, Rob. So what are you talking about? I need that federal money to go reclaim my mine or something like that. So, I'm having a hard time even looking through this, but we got clean water, which is very good. A whole section here. We have tribal connectivity, broadband affordability are also here, which is good because we know that previously that Joe Biden and I think Kamala Harris said that a lot of certain demographics in this country have a very difficult time getting on the internet. Said that it was Joe Biden said that minorities in rural areas couldn't even get on the internet, really, which was news to me because I didn't know that the president was that racist, but apparently he is. And then Kamala said that they don't have anything like Kinko's. They can't make copies of their photo ID. So very, very troubling there. What else is in here? We've got to Make America stuff, Make It in America, which is always good. Buy American. We have buyamerican.gov is going to be formed. So we'll see how much they stick to that. We have a chemical super fund and some other things. And my friends, that's just the table of contents. There is another 2,695 pages or so that you can read through, and you can just see what's going on in here. Do you expect any congressperson to read this? No, because this is just a grocery list. That's all it is. All these congresspeople do is they say, hey, I need this, and I need this, and I need this, and if you get me that, then I'll go ahead and sign it. And so they go around and they just, okay, well, what do you need there, Mitt Romney in Utah? Well, we got some mines there that need to be reclaimed, and they're abandoned. And so they slap that into the bill. And everybody just says, oh, that sounds good. I want some of that. Throw that in there. So nobody, of course, is going to read it. They're just going to go through it and pass it. And you're going to pay for it. We're all going to pay for it. And if you recall what happened with this last time, there was actually when we went through the bill, they had a lot of this where they were talking specifically about line item by line item. It'd be like 900 million for Sudan, 500 million for this other country. And the list went on and on and on. So it was not a surprise. Now, the question is, it sounds like the Senate is going to pass this thing. The next question is, what's the House of Representatives going to do with this? Are they actually going to pass this into law? Because remember, we've got two different bodies of governance here. We have the Senate and we have the House of Representatives. In the House of Representatives, they're saying, we're not passing that thing unless you pass our other, bigger, more expensive spending bill. So I want to show you this woman. Her name is Rep. Jayapal from Washington. She says, listen, we're not voting on that. I don't care if it's bipartisan or not. We are not going to be funding this thing because it is not good enough. Here is what she told Wolf Blitzer earlier today.
Well, we have said for 3 months, Wolf, and we've been very clear, I don't think anybody would be surprised, that we are not voting for a bipartisan infrastructure package without the reconciliation package that funds our progressive priorities. We made that very clear. Nobody should be surprised by that. We took a whip count almost a month and a half ago, and over 60% of our caucus felt that they could already say that they were completely with us. And we had a lot of people who, said, that's likely to be my position, but I want to wait and see. So there is a significant number of progressives in the House who will not vote for a bipartisan package without the reconciliation package. That is what Speaker Pelosi has said as well, and we're going to stick to that. The Senate wanted to do a bipartisan package. That's fine, Wolf, but there are two chambers in the United States Congress. The House of Representatives has 435 people, and each of us represents a district, and we want to make sure that this recovery is done in such a way that women, that folks of color, that poor people, working people have childcare, have paid leave, have access to higher education and community college, have health care in the midst of a crisis that is still not going away with the pandemic, and of course that we address climate change and immigration. So we are not backing off of that, and I think the Senate should understand that that is our position, has been our position, will be our position.
All right, so she's basically saying, yeah, no, it's not. I mean, it's not going anywhere. We'll see, right? I think that a lot of these stubborn Democrats in the House of Representatives are very likely to cave. Nancy Pelosi is very good about this, right? If the Republicans pass this thing, here, a little bit of framing on this, right? There are two infrastructure bills that are sort of working their way through the system. And recall that in order for a new bill to land on Biden's desk, we've got to have an agreement between both the Senate and the House of Representatives. And so right now, we've got a bipartisan agreement in the Senate, but we also have another sort of, complementary bill in the House of Representatives that's way bigger, that has all of the things that AOC and Cori Bush and this woman, they all want in it. And so they're saying, if you want us to vote yes on the Senate bill, well, you got to give us the reconciliation. You have to give us this other bill, and they can do it through a process of reconciliation where they can sort of merge the changes between the Senate and the House of Representatives into one final bill. So we'll see where it goes. Let's take some questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And we had a super chat come in as well over on YouTube. Let's pull that one back up. Let's see here. We have one from a Vault Formulae, always forward, a Vault Formali. Always forward. Love that. Says lots of open jobs because people are finally wanting a fair wage for being treated like crap, i.e. the food service industry. Love the show. It's good to see you, Evolve. That's an interesting perspective on that, right? So I think that a lot of people in the food service industry would probably agree with that, right? I think a lot of people are in that position right now, saying, "Well, I'm not going to go back to work. I'm getting money from the government, and I haven't been working, and I don't want to go do that anymore. And it's COVID, and so now I'm going to not work." And so I've heard of that. I've heard a lot of people, the response, "Well, just pay them more," and hard to do when businesses have been closed for a long time. So it's a very complicated issue, Evolve, and I appreciate you being here. Yeah, we'll see how it sorts itself out. Good to see you. Let's see what else. We've got some questions here from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Let me, forgot to queue these up here a little bit. Let me scroll back. I see Sharon's here. I also see it's Ed's in the house. So let's pull this over here and we'll get started on this topic here. Okay, so it's Ed is here with a long comment. I want to jump into this as Rob. It's funny how Trump didn't need any kind of infrastructure bill to stimulate the economy. The left always needs the government to do so. When was the last time it worked? Who's going to pay for this? Sick and tired of every penny going to the government. They steal from us. All right, jobs. I turn down more work than I can take. I can't hire new dispatchers. No one wants to work. Why would they? The government is giving them $1,200 a week. Equity, I work 14-hour days, 6 days a week. I hear you, Ed. Oh my gosh. I built something amazing. For the first 3 years, I barely made payroll. I took personal loans. Where was the idea of equity then? Where was the government then? Did they tell me I didn't have to pay the payroll taxes? Why are we promoting this idea of you don't have to work hard to succeed? I guess when the government supports you, don't have to work hard. Maybe I'm the dumb one. Sorry, Rob. Don't mean to get heated. I'm sick of these people making it harder to justify living where I live. I hear you. It's Ed. I completely agree with you on everything that you just said. It's very, very frustrating. It's a very difficult thing as a small business owner to navigate these waters. And then on top of it all, you add in just a constant 18 months, another 12 months of just raw uncertainty. Open, closing, masking, unmasking, new variants. Does it work? Does it not work? And it is very difficult to run a small business, which is part of the trajectory here. Who cares about the small businesses when you got Amazon, Facebook, and Twitter that are gobbling up all of everything anyways, right? We have No Doubt here says, can you do a search on the word boom boom stick? See if they snuck in a funding to study boom boom stick violence or develop plans for combating boom boom sticks. I didn't search for that one. It's a good one. I should have searched for that one. Good to see you here. No Doubt. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if that's in there. We got Sharon Quidney's here says, we ought to get Greenpeace or ALF or PETA on this one because it looks to me like pigs will be extinct by the time they make their way through all this pork. That's from Sharon Quidney in the house. Good to see you, Sharon. Yeah, lots of bacon in there, but not the good kind, the ugly kind that the politicians like. We have Peely Wally is in the house, says, hey, Rob, hope you had a great weekend. What a lot of complete waffle in that bill. You can tell Biden has had something to do with it since it's so tedious to go through. Peely Wally is in the house. Hope you had a great weekend too, Peely Wally. I did. You can see I sort of moved some stuff around in the studio and we're back in business. We're ready to rock and roll. Grateful that you're here. We also have Want to Know says infrastructure ready jobs. Yeah. How about Keystone Pipeline and border wall? Better high-paying union jobs. Seems the government wants to control everything. That's from Want to Know. I think that's a good point there, Want to Know. LT13 is here, says, buyamerica.gov, and they ship it to you from China. Probably. It's probably going to be the case. Maybe it'll come with a Hunter Biden artwork print. Fungus and milk. How about that? That'd be nice. It's Ed says, why do they keep saying have health care? Everyone has access to healthcare. You have to just pay for it, as you should. If I lack self-control and refuse to stay active, stay healthy, and have healthy issues for it, I should have to pay for those decisions. If they don't own a business, they shouldn't be allowed to work for the government. It's good to see you, it's Ed. You're hot, man, and I get it. I get it, too. It feels very frustrating that you have to, continually sort of watch the government. When you read these bills, they just sort of round it. It's like tip money to them. $100 million for this organization, $500 million to that organization. It's all a bunch of little piglets at the trough, just gobbling this all up. I mean, it's called pork for a reason, folks, because they are fat little pigs over there. Ransacking the treasury at your expense and your children's expense. Come on, man, is here, says the Senate bill wants less money infrastructure bill while the House of Congress wants a bigger bill. How about no more bill? And that means no more printing money. Yeah, the inflation numbers, well, we're going to see where that goes. Still a lot of roadway on that one left. We'll see where that one goes. And Federal Unemployment Tax Act is here, says they say that the money is going to infrastructure projects. The money is going towards pork barrel BS as well as corporate welfare. For example, the U.S. spent $1.6 trillion, yet one plane got shot down, but an out-of-date SAM site, and still in the development phase. So why would people believe the federal government will spend the money well? They don't. I don't believe that for a second. I don't believe that for a minute, right? And I think a lot of these stimulus, handouts, would have been better served in the forms of tax reductions and tax breaks and sort of, allowing the economy to do its thing. But that doesn't satiate the people in power, does it? So, all right. So great questions. I think that's it on that segment from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And I appreciate all of your support over there and, of course, on YouTube. We had another question come in. Let's see. Okay, let's see here. So we had another question come in. We'll get to that one before we jump into the next segment. Let's see. That one is from Just Cause. It says, side question here. How do you feel about someone in big tech needing to address as a pseudonym to save views on the internet because of job loss? So it's a good question there, and that's from Just Cause. Just Cause, I think that I don't have any particular problem with pseudonyms. There it is. It's on the screen. I don't have any problems with pseudonyms. I think that there's a bit of a problem with people being unable to sort of speak freely out there, right? Because of all of these repercussions. And I have a big problem with that, right? I think that certainly if you associate your identity with your speech, there's a lot of power behind that, right? Jordan Peterson talks a lot about this, and I think Naval talks a lot about this if you're into those two people. Naval says very regularly that you're going to be rewarded for that, right? If you're going to take a big, strong stand, you're going to get a lot of slings and arrows, but you're also going to get a lot of people who say, hey, that's pretty admirable, right? That person speaking their mind, they're standing for something, they're fighting for what they believe in, and you get benefits that flow from that. You also get a lot of flack, right? So in your case, Just Cause, you might lose your job if you speak out without a pseudonym. But the question is, what happens if you don't speak, right? There are penalties for that as well. There are consequences of speaking. There are consequences for not speaking. And so people have to balance these different things. They do an analysis and they might say that a pseudonym is not a bad thing, right? It's a lot of precedent for this in our history. People write books anonymously or pseudo-anonymously, right? Our founding fathers did this during in the Federalist Papers and other documents. So I think there's some pretty good precedent for that. And if that's something that allows you to speak while also protecting some of your economic and other interests, I think that's a good way to communicate out there on the internet. Great question, Just Cause. Thank you for that. All right. So in our next segment, Donald Trump back in the news. Does he ever go away? Not really, nor should he. But in this case, he's now facing the Justice Department. They're coming after his taxes again, folks. Every which way the man turns, they're going after him. He wants they want to make sure he doesn't run for office again. Boom, impeachment. They want to indict him on tax charges. Okay, they go after Weisselberg's grandkids in a private school somewhere in New York City so they can get to Donald Trump. The list goes on and on and on. And so there's been a big battle over the taxes. The Democrats want the taxes. They've wanted them for a long time. I don't really know what they're going to do with them, but the government now, because it's under Joe Biden, has flip-flopped itself. The Justice Department originally said, no, we're not giving those over to the Democrats. Those are private tax documents. You have no business with those. That was what Donald Trump's Justice Department said. And now that's going to be flipping. Joe Biden takes over. We get a new woman who's in charge of the Office of Legal Counsel. She drafts a memorandum saying, well, yep, here you go, whatever you want, Democrats. They're Trump's tax records, but he's not president anymore. There's a new chief in town, and we're going to swap this back over. You can comb through whatever you want. So let's go into this. We got a headline here from the Justice Department, or from Politico, says that the Justice Department says that Democrats are entitled to Donald Trump's tax returns. And we have a Democrat named Rep. Bill Pascrell extremely excited about this. Says, quote, it's about damn time, he says. Now, he's head of the Ways and Means Committee, which is going to be important here because the Justice Department is going to be justifying it on that basis. Basically, this guy's part of the Ways and Means Committee. There's a precedent for that. and it's now available. So this was written over the weekend on July 30th by Brian Fowler over at Politico. It says the Justice Department ruled on Friday that the tax returns from Trump should be released to the congressional Democrats. The administration is not going to hand them over themselves, though. Trump can object to this. This is a reversal of a legal opinion that came out from the Trump administration. Department said that lawmakers are entitled to information under an arcane law allowing heads of Congress's tax committees to examine anyone's private tax information, right? Trump administration said you can't do it. Politico says new sheriffs in town, they reverse the course, reverse the law. They find this old arcane law. Hey, if you're on a tax committee, a subcommittee in Congress, you have a carte blanche to whatever you want. Go get it. Up to you. Have fun. Go hog wild. The chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee has invoked sufficient reasons for requesting this information, said Don Johnsen, who we're going to talk about. Now, this is just sort of a summation of what's happening here. Let's learn quickly about Don Johnsen. You may remember her, right? This is what she looks like. She is now assumed office. She is the incumbent Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Legal Counsel. And you may remember the Office of Legal Counsel. It's sort of like the executive branch. It's like they're a lawyer, right? You know how all of you are very well prepared with your lawyer in your speed dial on your phone. All of you are. I know you are, because it's better to know them and not need them than it is to need them and not know them. It's good to have a good lawyer in your back pocket. But just like you can just call your lawyer and say, hey, I got a question about this legal issue. Can you help me? The executive branch has something similar. They've got this woman. Her name is Don Johnsen. She's over at the Office of Legal Counsel. And so as soon as Biden or Merrick Garland, they call up and they say, hey, we've got a question about these experimental vaccines. Can we mandate these things when they're still in this experimental status? Yes or no? What do you think about that? And of course, Don Johnsen comes out and she wrote this opinion that said, yeah, no problem at all. Whatever you need, no problem. She posted this back on July 6th, right? That says that the FDA cannot prohibit private entities from imposing vaccine requirements that are subject to emergency use only. That was previous. We already talked about Don Johnsen. We know her well. So Biden and Merrick Garland, they call her up again. They say, God, you did great work on the vaccines. So just to confirm on that, you said that we can sort of mandate this for anybody anywhere. Yeah, that's what I said, guys. No problem. Perfect. All right. You're our lawyer now. We love your work. We got another question for you here. Donald Trump. She goes, oh, I know. The worst. And they say, I know, but we got a plan. Don Johnsen says, what do you need there, Joe? Joe says, we got to get those taxes. Merrick Garland shaking his head. Yes, get them. Don Johnsen says, let me see what I can do. So she goes back to her quarters deep in a bunker in a basement somewhere, gets to work on her little laptop, and she drafts this memorandum. She says, okay, here, I figured it out. She goes, okay, how about this? We're going to go over to U.S. Code, Section 6103 F1, Title 26. Perfect. She says, okay, when we go into this, it vests congressional tax committees with a broad right to receive tax information from the Treasury. Perfect, right? So she's just combing through there. She's got all of her other little, bookworms just combing through the U.S. Code, finds it. She says, perfect. It embodies a long-standing judgment of the political branches that tax committees are uniquely suited to receive the information. Committees, however, cannot compel the executive branch to disclose it without satisfying the constitutional requirement that the information can serve a legitimate legislative purpose. So you see what she just did right there, right? She says, yes, I need to find this little provision in the code that allows me to go get it. Boom, got it. 6103 F1, Title 26 U.S. Code. Got it, nailed it. Basically says that anybody who's on a committee, as long as they have a legitimate legislative purpose, they can go get those tax records from any private individual, essentially for any reason. But it's got to be a legitimate legislative purpose. See that? So we have a limiting principle there. So now she's going to give us some framework in order to analyze this case. They're going to take a look at the Democrats and say, oh, okay, who's on this subcommittee? Oh, you need this. What's the purpose for? Let's see. Let's dig into it. In assessing whether it could serve a legitimate legislative purpose, the executive branch must give due weight to Congress's status as a co-equal branch. Like courts, executive officials then must apply the presumption that the legislative branch officials act in good faith and in furtherance of legitimate objectives. Okay? So now you have to ask yourself this. As somebody who's a Democrat, as somebody who's watching this show saying, Rob, you're mildly entertaining, but I disagree with you often. you're sitting there saying, okay, we know the standard. They can get it if they're on a tax committee, and as long as it's for legitimate objectives, and as long as it's being done in good faith for a legitimate legislative purpose, then it's fair game. And all the Democrats are going, oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, it's in good faith. No problems at all. We just have a couple questions. And she says, yeah, no problem. That's great. That's great. Well, when one of the congressional tax committees requests tax information and has invoked facially valid reasons for its request, the executive branch should conclude that the request lacks a legitimate legislative purpose only in exceptional circumstances, okay? So when they send a request over and it looks good, then the executive branch should just say, well, we should comply. Always, unless there are exceptional circumstances. So here they say the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee has invoked sufficient reasons for requesting the former president's tax information. Therefore, the Treasury must furnish the information to the committee. Okay, so perfectly legitimate, good faith. They're just, look, they have some questions about the U.S. tax code, and they don't like, billionaires sort of escaping the tax code. So they just want Donald Trump's, but they're not looking at anybody else's. Just Donald Trump's. All right, so we know who Don Johnson is. Now let's take a quick look at what's going on in this opinion. We're going to go through it. We got the most of it in that slip opinion, but I want to see if we can tease out here what else is going on. So this is from the introduction, memorandum opinion for the acting general counsel for the Department of Treasury. So they got a written request from the chairman that came in. They want tax returns for 8 Trump-related businesses. Why? Why do they want it? Chairman Neal also sought the IRS audit histories and work papers associated with the returns. He explained that the committee was, quote, considering legislative proposals and conducting oversight related to our federal tax laws. Including the extent to which the IRS audits and enforces federal tax laws against the president, right? So they're just doing, it's just research. That's all it is for. The IRS is responsible for processing and conducting tax law enforcement in this country. So you have Ways and Means Committee. He just says, no, we just want to see what the IRS does with presidents. And we just happen to need Trump's because he hasn't disclosed them to us. And so we're going to consider legislative proposals. And we're going to conduct oversight. And so how does that sound? And Don Johnson over there at OLC says, yes, that sounds great. It's perfect. It's exactly what I need. As long as it's legitimate legislative perfect. You got it. You're thinking about some perfect, right? It's like when you go to lunch with a friend and you talk nothing about business, and then at the end of the lunch they say to you, how's business? And you say, it's great. And they say, perfect. We talked about business. So now I can write off this whole lunch. And they write it on the back of their receipt. And they think they're very clever, which is something I always do because I think I'm very clever. And so, you have some of those comments that happen and everybody sort of, pats themselves on the back. Hey, nice job. You said the right words at the right time. Well done. Exactly what happened here. We have chairman of the Ways and Means Committee now colluding with the OLC to get Trump's taxes. We'll see where it goes. Treasury sought this office's advice. Are we allowed to do this? She goes through, says, yep, no problem at all. Office provided the Treasury more detailed opinion, saying as long as it's the actual purpose was not only reasonable, but correct, then they're allowed to do it. The committee sued to enforce its subpoenas. Let's see what else is going on here. They asked for some more reviews. The statute here is unambiguous, so they go back to the code. They say, upon written request of the chairman of one of 3 congressional tax committees, the secretary, quote, shall furnish the tax information. Right? That's according to U.S. code. So she's going in, digging that out. The 2019, they say. So they're reversing a prior opinion. The big problem with this is that anytime you come into power, right now, this sort of opens the door for all of this moving forward. So as soon as Republicans seize control of the House of Representatives, which is probably going to happen in, 18 months or so, then they now will take control of the Ways and Means Committee. And guess what happens then? Well, as long as, they set this standard now that essentially you can get tax records for the president, even as long as you're considering some legislation that has a legitimate purpose. So as soon as the Republicans sweep into power, they're going to say, hey, Joe Biden, your OLC said that we're allowed to do this. And they're going to do it. And they're going to go after all the Democrats and say, well, we need the vice president's tax records, or we need this information about this person. And they're going to sort of, compare and contrast it to some of these other things, and the Republicans are going to use it all day long, which is part of the problem and why these things are not particularly effective. Applying the proper degree of deference to the committee, we believe there is ample basis to conclude that its June 2021 request would further the committee's principal stated objective of what? Assessing the IRS's presidential audit program, a plainly legitimate area for congressional inquiry and possible legislation. Chairman's additional stated objectives for reviewing that tax information are also legitimate, and the committee has individual authority to seek records for those reasons as well. Even if some members of Congress hope to see information from the president's tax returns on public record merely for the sake of exposure, that would not invalidate the legitimate objectives that the committee in receipt of the information could serve. See what happened there? So she says, yes, even if the true reason, she didn't say this, but this is what she's saying. Even if the real reason why they want these tax records is just because they want to shove their thumb right in Trump's eyeball, that's okay, as long as they have another legitimate reason. We see this all the time in criminal law, right? They'll pull people over for a tail light, or they'll pull you over for a wide right turn. Oh no, we had to stop you for that reason. That's not the real reason they stop you. It's a pretextual stop. They just watched you leave that marijuana store, or they watched you leave that bar. They're going to stop you and investigate you for a DUI. But they can't pull you over for DUI on suspicion of leaving a bar. That's not justification enough. So then they make up some nonsense reason for actually pulling you over, and then they can proceed with their investigation. Same thing's happening here. They're saying, oh no, we have a legitimate reason to get those documents. Don Johnson says, you sure do. You're thinking about a legislation. You're a congressperson. So that's great you're thinking about it. Totally legitimate, totally reasonable. Whatever you need, just go get it. I know that you're going to disclose this to the Washington Post, New York Times, and CNN. But as long as you stick to your original story that, well, we're just contemplating a new bill, then you're totally covered and kosher. No problem at all. Acting Assistant Attorney General Don Johnsen, for the foregoing reasons, we conclude that the Secretary must comply with the Ways and Means Committee pursuant to U.S. Code. Furnish the committee with the specified tax returns and related information. Don Johnsen, over here, she is super lawyer for the Biden administration. Just whatever you need. She is like Gumby. She can twist herself into a pretzel to make anything happen for them at all. And so this is a problem for the DOJ, in my opinion. It's not, because this is how the DOJ is now. The DOJ is sort of a weaponized political institution that both political sides of the aisle use to smack the other side. And so, unfortunately for the people in the DOJ, they have to live with this organization that is sort of flip-flopping all of the time. And so we know that a prior opinion from 2019 conducted by the DOJ, conducted by their lawyers and all the smart people in there, concluded that it was not appropriate for partisan hacks in Congress to get their enemies' tax documents. Not appropriate. But as soon as the changing of the guard happened, DOJ shifts, we get a new bureaucrat in there, and so they just reverse everything that the same DOJ said in 2019. Almost reminds you of the CDC, just sort of changing everything. Right? It doesn't matter. Oh, masks on, masks off, 2 masks, 3 masks. Don't mask again. Vaccines work. Now they they work, but with some precautions on there. And so it's constant uncertainty, constant changing, and we know that it's not based in principles. It's based in politics, which is exactly why it's happening. Let's take a look at some questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Let's see what we've got here in the house. We got several of them coming in from Sharon Quidney. Says, why should they stop at Trump and his immediate supporters? If they open this door, then we are all in danger of being harassed and prosecuted. How can this be legal? Is there some legal recourse? Well, Donald Trump is going to be allowed to contest this. And certainly he'll be able to go. So remember, this is just a legal opinion, right? This is just an opinion that came out of the executive branch. So Donald Trump could certainly, sue the government and say, nope, they're releasing my private information. And he may already be doing that. I'm not real sure where that's at, but certainly he could ask for an injunction from, basically file a suit from the clerk or the secretary or whoever received the order to release the documents from the IRS, an injunction to stop that transmission from happening. So Trump may be, already working through that. I don't know. But I think the point of this is once that document hits the Democrats, it's now going to be, publicly available and available for everybody. So it's going to be a continued spectacle. Let's see. We've got Thunder 7 in the house. Says, Rob, you missed my question last section. Sorry about that, Thunder 7. Not the first time. Oh, well, no big deal. They've been searching for a crime to indict Trump for 5 years. Never happened. Never will, because he's done nothing illegal. Would love to see Hunter Biden's taxes, though. Yeah, I wonder if this might be. So first of all, Thunder 7, I apologize that I keep missing your questions. That's not appropriate. But I sort of botched that. So that's my fault because I opened the form late. And I'll do better. But the point here is your question, I think, is pertinent, right? They have been trying to indict this man. They've tried to impeach him twice. They are going after his CFO's grandkids at a private school. They are grasping and grasping and grasping. They haven't found anything. They even had to manufacture stuff with the Steele dossier and Lisa Page and Peter Strzok and the whole debacle with the FBI to try to essentially set something up that we've all seen has fallen through and been a useless waste of time and resources if you're being nice about it, and something that is an absolute travesty of justice. It is a weaponization of the FBI and our Justice Department against political enemies, which is a anti-American problem in this country. So I agree that they have gone hog wild to try to get something on Donald Trump, and they just haven't been able to find it. At this point in time, I think that the tax thing might just be a red herring. I think that the Democrats might like to just constantly be fighting over this. Donald Trump won't release his taxes, and Donald Trump keeps it. It reminds me of the Obama birth certificate thing, right? This thing that was always floating around that everybody sort of liked to pick up and run with. If the tax records come out, is there going to be anything in them? I don't even know. Good to see you, Thunder 7. Sorry I missed your questions. Peely Wally says, the way the Democrats act regarding Trump makes my blood boil. I do hope that Trump runs and wins in 2024 and then launches a full investigation into the Biden crime family. Well, look, if that happens, right, if Trump does win, the Democrats are laying down the train tracks for all sorts of inquisitions back into their administration because they did it to Donald Trump. They can't. If Donald Trump turns around and does this to all of the Democrats, everybody's going to turn around and start screaming from the rooftops. This is a dictatorship. This is somebody who is seizing control of the power of the power of the country, and they are, sort of seizing democracy away from everybody else. And not really, because the Democrats are doing that. Trump can just use the same mechanisms that they are using, and I think he has a little bit of criticism armor as a result. Saw a super chat come in from Kareem165, says, the more these crooks go after Trump, the more popular he gets. They are afraid to go on a level playing field against him in 2024. I think so. I agree with that, actually. I think what you're seeing now is a lot of persuasion. They're doing everything they can now to make sure that all the jabs and arrows, all the barbs are being stuck in Donald Trump right now, because they know after 2022, the tides are going to shift and they're going to lose some of the tools that exist in their tool belt. So all of this is taking place right now. We're seeing these OLC memos. We're seeing a lot of the framework being laid right now, because in 2022, if it continues to go this way, I think there's going to be a red wave that wipes out Democratic power for the foreseeable future. Great question. Let's see what else we have here. We got a couple more coming in. We had a super chat. Got that one from Kareem. Let's see what else. Over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, we've got LT13 says, do they even have time to look at Trump's taxes? It's taking them years to go through Hunter Biden's. I would assume their workload is too much. Well, LT13, I get it, but you're presuming that they're going to read anything. Like, they've got a 2,700 page bill that is now on their desk, and they're all just going to say, we're not reading. Did you read that? No, I didn't read it either. And so you're just going to have all of these senators who are sort of like mutiny in the classroom. They're not going to read it. So they are going to read Trump's taxes because that's more interesting. It's sort of like the comic book versus the biology book, right? Which one are you going to pick? The Democrats, we know where they're going on that. So they'll carve out time for that. I'm not worried about that. We have Want to Know says, how does a normal person afford her? Got to give her credit for supplying the answer her client wants. She's good at it. Yeah. She's very good. Don Johnson, Gumby lawyer extraordinaire. Very good. Want to Know says, how does a normal person... Oh, already got that one. Sorry about that, Want to Know. Let's see here. We got Sharon Quidney says, remember that quote, show me the man, and I'll show you the crime. That's from Sharon Quidney on Trump's taxes. That's right. They can find anything. Hunter Biden's here. Oh, perfect. Says, I'm glad Dad got me off the hook for my crimes. I love having the DOJ focus on Trump, which allows me to paint in peace. If I need legal counsel in the future, I'll be sure to hit up your firm, Robert. That's from Hunter Biden over here. Well, okay, so that's fine. He'll give us a call, and we'll have to talk. We'll have to talk about that one, I guess. I'll tell our team here. Be prepared for that. Don't come into our office, okay? Just send me an email. All right, Hunter. All right, we have Joe Biden's here. It says, Robert, come on, man. This is totally not a political prosecution. I'm not trying to send my political opponents into a gulag. Come on, man. No Doubt says, don't we have some law that prevents the government from using their powers to target an individual? Isn't that why she qualifies her answer with a good faith statement? What options does an individual have to fight this type of overreach? Well, so, it's a good question, no doubt. I think, my hot take on it is sort of what I was saying earlier, that Donald Trump could, file. Again, this is a legal opinion, right? This is an opinion that came over from the Office of Legal Counsel. It's advice to the DOJ. The DOJ is taking that advice, but they are still the government. And so Donald Trump, as the recipient of this, is essentially, it would be a plaintiff. He'd be filing to say the government is violating my constitutional rights to privacy. I've got protection against this thing from happening, and make his argument under the law, right? He can write, his attorneys could write a contrary memorandum. They could say, no, we looked at that code that Don Johnson had pulled out of, wherever she got that. And we can say our interpretation of this is different, that political hacks in Congress don't just get unfettered access to whatever documents they want. Otherwise, there's a very, very big danger here that partisan political hacks on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, will use this stuff for nefarious purposes. They're going to use their newly found powers to just go get whatever they want, and that's going to be a big problem. So Trump and his attorneys could certainly file that memo. They could ask for an injunction to stop the IRS from sending the documents, from actually transmitting the documents back over to the Ways and Means Committee. But outside of that, right, it is what it is. It's the government that's writing a memo about something that it wants to do anyways. It's the executive branch sort of trying to collude here with the legislative branch, and they're using the IRS to do it. They're saying, hey, we need a lawyer. We need some information on this. Can we send it over? Executive sends it over to their attorney. Attorney goes to the enforcement arm of tax law, the IRS, analyzes it, sends it over to a co-equal branch, the legislative branch, whatever you need. And all of this is being done to win a political war against a political enemy. Legislation. Give me a stinking break here. All right, that was from No Doubt. We have Sharon Quidney says, and as far as the Republicans coming into power in 2022, I don't think that's happening. The Dems won't let it happen. That's a good point, Sharon. If their secret cabal that was in cahoots during the last election that Time Magazine reported on and many others, maybe you're right. I don't know. But if the current trajectory keeps going, I can't see how there is not just a swarm of red that seizes the country. Be Brave says, what legitimate purpose could they have for obtaining former president tax returns? They are scared of their own people. They're saying that it has to do with the IRS oversight and auditing Donald Trump and people who are presidents. That's their justification for it. If you believe that, well, that's a whole separate thing. Let's see here. I've got an off-topic question. Let's come back to that one. We've got chairman of the board says, weaponizing the IRS and taxes against a private citizen. Sounds familiar. Like Obama versus the Tea Party familiar. Yep, I remember that. Right? IRS. I say this all the time. When the government touches you inappropriately, it's through the IRS or through law enforcement. If they can't get you through law enforcement, they'll get you through the IRS. We have here, remember that time they accused Trump of weaponizing the situation in the Ukraine versus a, quote, political adversary? Ah, yes, good times. Rules for thee, but not for me. Seems to be the normal theme at play. That's from chairman of the board. Good to see you, chairman. It's a great point. And I'm glad you're here. Thank you for that. Let's go to this off-topic question from Trump. Trump says, Rob, please review the video from July 29th involving Gates, Gosar, Gohmert, Green. They were trespassed from a federal building while attempting to check on the January 6 prisoners. Supervisor asked them to step outside, lock the doors. There was an attorney attempting to visit a client. Would love your thoughts on this. Thanks. So Trump. It's a good question, right? Now, I think I was doing a hot take on this. And, I don't know what what the special powers of Congress are, right? And so there are a lot of caveats here. I don't know what gates and ghosts are and what jail facility they were at or anything like that. But if they were expecting to just go get access to the prisoners, like if they scheduled an unscheduled, event, if they thought that without scheduling something that they could just sort of walk into a prison and just get access to the cells and just go like take a look around, right? I've never seen or heard of anything like that happening ever, right? You just don't get access to that. Now, I don't know if as Congress people or if they're on, some sort of, justice committee or something like that, if they have any special privileges as members of Congress in D.C. to go and, inspect those things, or if they have any special immunities or anything like that, right? I can't speak to that. I don't know. Never heard of anything like that. But just from a practical standpoint, it seemed more like a political spectacle. Now, not that it's a bad thing, right? I think that they're sort of the principle of the matter is spot on. And I've been screaming about what's happening with the January 6th defendants for months now, many months. And I do think that they're being treated inappropriately. I do think that there are due process violations. I do think that they should have been released on bond. Many other people have been released on bond or released on recognizance, for crying out loud. The penalties seem to be inappropriate. We saw a lot of people, Antifa, BLM, people who were throwing Molotov cocktails at federal court buildings, and many others getting very nice deals, whereas the January 6th defendants, not so much. That's a problem. But if we are expecting Gates, Gosar, Gomort, or Green, or any of those people to just walk in, hey, I'm from Congress, let me in, show me around the facilities, that's not a practical thing. If you've ever been to a jail or a prison, it doesn't work like that, right? There's layers of security and it just doesn't work like that. So I'm not sure what they were expecting. They probably wanted some camera stuff to take place, and they got that. So good question. Thank you for that. That was from, let's see, who was that from? That was from Trump. Good to see you there, Trump. All right, my friends. That was more great questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And as I was wrapping that up, another super chat came in. Thank you. Jupaz here says, anyone that doesn't realize we have made strides in putting a tyrannical government in is not paying attention. The government has gotten too big. Couldn't agree with you more on that there. That was from Jupa, and that was a super chat that came in over from YouTube, and thank you for that. Those are now active and available, and I appreciate your support there, Jupa. We had Kareem and Just Cause as well. Also appreciate all of you for your support with a vault and others. All right, so thank you for all of those questions. Watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We've got one segment left. Let's get to it. The Biden crime wave, many people are calling it this, I think with pretty good reason, and I've been aggressive with Joe Biden, calling him the godfather of the current criminal justice system because he was somebody who passed a bunch of crime bills. 1994 crime bill is the big one that a lot of people sink their teeth into. But prior to that, 1984, 86, 88, I think were three, and many others, he has been passing justice reform bills basically his entire time in the Senate, responsible for things like the 3 strikes laws, mandatory sentencing, all sorts of major problems that we see in our justice system today, all go right back to Joe Biden, in one criminal defense attorney's humble opinion. But something interesting changed during the 2020 election. Joe Biden, somebody who is a big proponent of big, massive law enforcement and throwing everybody who did drugs in prison, as long as it wasn't his son, everybody else, mostly African Americans, as a result of the crack cocaine epidemic, Joe Biden wanted them all in jail. But in 2020, the tide changed a little bit. We saw George Floyd died, and the whole country was now really angry with law enforcement, very angry with Republicans who have been traditionally seen as big law enforcement party. So Biden and Kamala Harris now really milked in all of 2019 and 2020. It's sort of this BLM, sort of rethinking of law enforcement with a big push to defund the police. We saw that everywhere in 2020 during the summer of unrest that we saw take place very, very regularly. Protests, buildings being burnt down, 3rd Precinct in Minneapolis torched to the ground. We had many, many people injured, hurt, and killed as a result of all of that. And cities across the country were just defunding the police, saying, we don't want law enforcement anymore. They're racist. They're white supremacists. They're a bunch of people that don't care about minority communities. And as this pendulum was swinging the other way, we were on this channel warning, if you treat all the police like they are all racist white supremacists, Well, they're just not going to work anymore. If you really want to defund them, they'll go find other jobs in other industries. And the cities will start to crumble. And the pendulum will swing back the other way. And then we're going to see even more law enforcement, even more totalitarian types of sort of watering down of your civil rights, your civil liberties, all in the name of justice. We're seeing it now with new gun reform talk. Gun violence is the new big thing. In the 80s and 90s, it was drug violence. Same Joe Biden, just a new wrapper on it. So now we're going to spend some time going around the different cities here. In Washington, D.C., crime wave taking place heavily. Murders surpass coronavirus deaths in July by 3-to-1 ratio. Young girl named Naya Courtney, 6 years old, killed in July. Number of homicides in D.C. beat coronavirus deaths by a 3-to-1 ratio in July. 21 homicides throughout the month compared to 8 coronavirus deaths in Fox, according to Fox 5 D.C. We have a councilman named Trayon White said, "We've put a lot of resources and time into the COVID pandemic. We're in a pandemic right now when it comes to crime in this community. We got to start acting it." He said this following a July 16th killing of a 6-year-old girl named Naya Courtney. Statistic comes as D.C. recorded 100 homicides this year that was done by July 10th. Earliest the city has hit that number since 2003. So they have this counter in Washington, D.C. How long does it take to get to 100 homicides? This year, they got it July 10th. Oh, 100. July 10th, 100 homicides. Okay. D.C. Police Union said that average date over the past 10 years was normally October 25th. So we're a couple months early. July, August, September, October. Okay, so about 3 months early. In 2019, 2018, city hit 100 homicides in August, but the city reached the mark in July. So we're going up again, right? Over the past to October, then we go to August, now we're July. So it feels like, based on their numbers, homicides are increasing. As of July 30th, there were 113 homicides in D.C. compared to 108 last year. Fox News reached out to some of the people who run things over there. We'll see what they have to say. This is the D.C. police chief. Now, the question has always been, well, why is this happening? What's going on here? You know, we've been hearing from the Biden administration that it's domestic violent extremists, that this is domestic terrorism, according to Nancy Pelosi, that this is something that comes from the Proud Boys or the 3%ers or any of these other white supremacist militia groups that are apparently ransacking America. That's the biggest problem. And now it's gun violence. And now it's something that we have to sort of rethink what the Second Amendment looks like now in order to address this problem. Let's take a look at what the D.C. Chief of Police has to say. Hey, D.C. Chief of Police, Robert Conti, you have all these homicides taking place in your city. You're in charge of this. What do you have to say about it?
198 people murdered in our city last year. This should be shocking to the conscience of every person in our city. I don't care where you live. It's got the attention that it's got now because it's happened where it happened, because we had an incident at the National Stadium. But this issue that's crossing our city, there are too many guns in our city, in Washington, D.C. Last night, before that shooting had happened, our officers assigned here in the 3rd District, they recovered a firearm off an individual down here at 11th and S in Vermont. Right before that, a firearm right up here, 14th and Irving Street. After the sounds of gunshots, right up there. When this shooting happened, officers, within 5 seconds of the shooting where it happened, that's unacceptable. It speaks to the brazenness of the criminals that are in these communities that we're dealing with. Some of them are our neighbors, some are. And we have to really figure out what do we want to do as a city in terms of how we respond to this.
Okay. Yeah. So listen, I don't have any problems with that, right? When I see this man speaking, I see somebody who's very frustrated, somebody who's sort of out of options. And he seems like he's engaged with the community. He's standing out there with a big group of people, the citizens on the street saying, listen, man, we're trying to figure this thing out. We have people who are just dropping dead like flies because of shootings that are taking place. And you heard him say there specifically, he said, listen, there was a shooting that took place. Our officer was there in like 5 seconds. He was standing right there. But the question, and so he points to this as being a gun problem, right? There are too many guns in our cities and they are being used brazenly. And so as somebody, who doesn't want to live in a city where you can just get shot randomly, right? People think that because I'm a criminal defense lawyer that I sort of embrace and encourage criminality. Couldn't be further from the truth. I have to live in the same society as everybody else. And so I don't want to be walking down Washington, D.C. and get shot over something ridiculous, right? I don't want to live in that world. Neither do you. Neither do the criminals. Nobody does. And so the question is, what do we do about it? And this man is very frustrated. He's out there saying, look, it's about guns. We have criminals committing crimes, and there's too many guns in the hands of citizens. And so you might say, okay, as maybe a Washington, D.C. person, it's guns, right? There are shootings, and it's because of the guns. If you agree with that, well, you'd be perfect in the Biden administration, because that's what they think too. They think it's all the gun is the problem. It's not the person. It's not the city. It's not the culture. It's not the people doing the shooting. It's the gun. And if we just seize all the guns, then suddenly that's going to fix everything, apparently. So if that's the case, well, if it is guns, could there be anything else? All right, here's DC. It's not just shootings, folks. We also have carjacking, okay? We saw many of these. DC carjacking task force now nabs more teens, at least 14 13-year-olds in a week. We have 4 13-year-olds in a week. Carjacking. So many that DC police has a carjacking task force. They announced its latest a round of arrests on Sunday. Every suspect there is a juvenile, including one who's only 13 years old. There's at least a 4 13-year-old arrested in D.C. Suspects are facing charges ranging from armed carjacking to armed robbery to unauthorized use of a vehicle. Okay, so if it's a gun problem, well, then how the heck are 13-year-olds getting guns for armed robbery and armed carjacking? Because if they go to a gun store, they're not going to sell them a gun. So they got the gun from an adult somewhere, or adults are participating in this or encouraging this. But is that a gun problem? Or is that an adult-child culture, nurturing, parenting problem? There's a lot. But they're going to blame the guns. Let's see what happened with these carjackings. They gave us an announcement here. Detectives from the Metro Police, they announced several arrests. July 31st, we had a 15-year-old juvenile male arrested. Unauthorized use of a vehicle, armed carjacking. He had a gun. 1:23 in the morning, a 15-year-old kid, 1:30 in the morning with a gun out in Washington, D.C. Armed carjacking with another gun. We had another one. Also, Saturday, July 31st. 17-year-old juvenile male, Southeast D.C. Armed carjacking, another one. In addition, we had a 13-year-old juvenile male, Saturday, July 31st, also arrested. Armed carjacking with a gun, 10 p.m. at night. So, is it just the guns? Is it just gun violence? How are 17-year-olds, 13-year-olds, and 15-year-olds getting guns, going out at 1:30, 10 at night, 12:05 in the morning, and conducting carjackings? It's probably the gun's fault, right? Obviously. Okay, so in D.C., they can't figure it out. Same things going on in Chicago. They're also clueless. 461 shootings during July alone, which is really crazy because they've got some pretty tough gun laws there in Chicago. D.C. also. Here in Chicago, 461 shootings. 461, increase over 402, which happened last year in July, so it's getting worse. 614 people were shot compared to 561 last year. NBC pointed out the city saw a slight decrease in homicides. So more people are getting shot, but less people are dying. However, the number in July 2021, homicides was up over 139% over 2019. Breitbart reports 27 people were shot from Friday to Saturday night, which were the last 2 days in July 2021. 27 people shot. That's great. And the FBI is still on Twitter trying to find grandma. ABC says that nearly 50 people were shot by the time the weekend was over. 4 of those shooting victims died. 70 people were shot between July 23rd and 25th in Chicago, 12 of them fatally. Okay, well, that's good. So horrible, right? Horrible that people are being shot and killed in these cities, but I guess they should probably tighten up their gun laws there. Might be a good idea. Chicago should have more strict gun laws. That might help that. Good luck there. Okay, so in Portland now, we're going to go across the country. Let's go over to Portland and see what these yahoos are doing. We remember Ted Wheeler. Remember this fella? Ted Wheeler, that's what he looks like. Well, he kind of botched his entire city over there in Portland. Just kind of wrecked it, really. Oh, let's see what's going on. Wall Street Journal says that in Portland, they can't find police for the unit to fight the rising murder rate, right? Murder rates rising across the country, Joe Biden's America. Few volunteer for new gun violence team. Why? Because it comes with more oversight and a mission to combat racism. Okay, so let's get into this. Leaders in Portland, Oregon, they're looking to combat a city's rising homicide rate. They want to resurrect a police unit that focuses on gun violence. Oh, but after a year of growing tension, they can't find enough officers to join. You're kidding me. Since 14 job openings were announced in May, only 4 police personnel have applied to work with the Portland Gun Violence Reduction Team, shut down last year amid long-running protests seeking racial justice. Well, I hope they got it. They wanted an overhaul of police practices, but none have yet been assigned. Portland officers say such positions, once considered prestigious, are now less desirable, given the increased scrutiny that accompanies them. The new unit has its own citizen advisory board, instituted after the old unit was criticized by city leaders for racial profiling. A job description says qualifications include the ability to fight systemic racism. Okay. The ability to fight systemic racism as a police officer. So we have officers, Sergeant Bob and many others who watch the show. And I trust their skill set, but the ability to fight systemic racism, wow, that's a tall order as a police officer. Sir, think you're going to be a great officer here. In fact, you might be a chief one day. If you can fight for justice adequately. Yeah, I can do that. Sir, what do you need from me? Systemic racism. It's the biggest problem in our city. You're on it. You're on charge of that. I can't even get through it. You're in charge of that. Go out there and fight that systemic racism. I'm on it, sir. What do you need? I need a badge and a gun. Well, not the gun really, because those are racist. How about the badge? Well, that's also pretty racist because it sort of shows me exercising my authority over indigenous peoples in our city. So that's racist too. So I really don't need either one of those. What would you like me to do? Well, you can't respond to any crimes or anything like that, because if you do, you're probably going to be, murdering somebody who shouldn't be murdered, and that's a big problem for us here. So why don't you just sort of sit there and not do anything? Let us figure out the rest of this. So police officers are now being expected to fight systemic racism. I have no idea how. Daryl Turner, head of the union over there in Portland, said that they are demonizing and vilifying you. Then they want you to put you in a unit where you're under an even bigger microscope, which is exactly the point that I've been saying for some time. If, there's a lot of people out there, the ACAB people, the all cops are bad people, or the all cops are, the B word, and never supported that at all. And you're going to see what happens if you continue to believe that. Right now, I've said for a long time here, the bad popo, they've got to go. And we make sure we call them out vehemently. But at the same time, the people calling to defund the police, they're going to be ruining their own cities, as Ted Wheeler is doing. Following calls to defund the police, the Portland City Council last summer voted to cut $15 million from the police department. That included a 38-person gun violence team. So they're all gone. $15 million, 38-person gun violence team gone. They criticized them for racial profiling. In 2019, 52% of that team, they stopped black people. They make up only 5.8% of the city population. So clearly racist, obviously. Bunch of racist cops on that. So they're gone. City council said, get out of here. We don't want racist cops. After the team was disbanded, then homicides rose. You're kidding. That's weird. I wonder why that happened. Because those racist cops aren't there anymore. So, I wonder what happened there. Weird. This spring, Portland police officials proposed creating a new team. So, in March, 15 million gone. 38 people gone. Homicides go up. We need you to come back. Then in March, Ted Wheeler announced a new police unit called the Focused Initiative Team. Oh, that's beautiful. So it goes from the gun violence reduction team over to the focused initiative team. Oh, that's beautiful. Much better, much less racist. And said it would focus on lowering tensions with residents along with combating gun violence. So it's like lowering tensions by showing up and giving people massages and then also combating gun violence. So it's sort of, asking them to do a bunch of both. The Democrats said an 11-member board made up of community members would oversee it. That's nice. So community members now. An internal posting described jobs on the focused initiative team as focusing on the Portlanders most likely to be involved in gun violence, like the old unit. But it included a new list of required qualifications, including, quote, the ability to identify and dismantle institutional and systemic racism in the Bureau's responses to gun violence. Oh my gosh. I can't even laugh at. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh. So this next quote is perfect. Martin Luther King couldn't dismantle systemic racism. Now you want a cop to do it? That's what a Portland officer said. Nobody wants to be a part of something that's set up for failure. Mr. Wheeler's office did not respond to requests for comment. What a disaster. Absolute disaster. I can't believe that man is still in charge of anything over there in Portland, but I think he is sort of a perfect symbol of Portland. I've been to Portland in many, many years, but feels very Portlandy to me. No offense to any Portland listeners out there, but what the heck is going on in that city? Wild, wild stuff. All right, let's take a look at some questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Pull up some questions here, our last segment of the day. We got some coming in from Thunder7 says, Rob, I heard many police are moving to Texas and Florida and other red states. The lunatic left Dems like Lightfoot and others calling to defund the police had private security to protect them. Up by millions while the poor get killed, robbed, and raped during the Biden crime wave. Yeah, it's true. I see a lot of that. I see AOC, all the Republicans, of course, all the Democrats. They all have Secret Service and security up the wazoo. But in Chicago, kind of on your own. Portland, kind of on your own now. And so these same cities that are defunding the police so that the police can't protect you also have very draconian gun laws so that you also can't protect yourself in that way either. So slightly problematic. Good to see you, Thunder7. Appreciate the question. We have It's Ed says, Rob, why wasn't the individual more honest? Why didn't he address the truth? How many of the guns were legal? I hear someone like him speak with such passion, but I can't believe him. He is being dishonest about guns. I think that's a fair point, Ed, right? He comes out, he knows what the talking point is, right? He can't come through there and say, well, these are problems with our parents not parenting their 13-year-olds who are out there robbing people. Right? Why didn't he say that? Why didn't he say that maybe our community has a responsibility to ensure that there's, anything like that? He blames guns. And that's what politicians always do because it's very easy. They blame guns and they blame drugs. They don't want to get involved in any of the other issues because, well, they can't really, right? He's just law enforcement. So I understand your perspective. Maybe I'm being a little bit too empathetic with him. Sergeant Bob is in the house. I was hoping to hear from you, Sergeant Bob. I'm glad you're here. Says, here we go. He says, retired from the People's Republic of P-Land in 2007. In touch with what is happening now. Popo leaving in droves. Okay, look, folks. This is Sergeant Bob in the house. Okay, so pay attention. Popo are leaving in droves. Surrounding suburbs and other cities are welcoming them with opening arms. There you go. Popo with looking or waiting to retire. New hires have flunked probation at twice the former rate. Applicants subpar. Emergency calls take minimum 6 minutes for response. Pretextual stops good for taking guns off gangsters, even if no arrest. Cops now prohibited from doing those stops. Homicide rate off the charts. If I was still working there, I would be on the last train to Clarksville. 24 years with PPB. I never once saw or heard of any police action taken due to race. And by choice, I worked many years in the predominantly black areas. Do not apply to P-Land. If you live there, get firearms training and be ready to protect yourself. The cops will not get there in time. It's from Sergeant Bob. And Sergeant Bob is the real deal. I mean, you heard him. You don't need me to explain it, but yeah, and I don't know. this is awful, terrible news, because what happens is the people get fed up with it. They start demanding more law enforcement. The city comes back. They throw a bunch of money at it, and it's tricky. Thank you for that, Sergeant Bob. I'm sort of flustered right now, because what ends up happening is, I always talk about the pendulum. You probably get tired of hearing me say that word, but it swings back the other way. People come back and they demand a draconian response from the government. They say, we have a big problem here. People are dropping dead. There are gunshots going off all over the place, and we demand action. The government comes in and says, oh, no problem. We're happy to help. Why don't you just let us federalize the police? And everybody says, sure, no problem. We're so sick of all these people dropping dead, whatever you need. Then you have you have feds now in your cities. So great. We have Want to Know says, D.C. police chief in the longer interview blamed it on the courts. Certain people need to be locked up. One of the best police interns I've seen in a long time. Police interns. So there's some of that too, right? I'm a criminal defense attorney, and there's some weird things going on with justice reform where police are sort of, kind of tweaking the rules a little bit, or courts are around the margins. We've got It's Ed is here, says, unauthorized use of a vehicle. I guess we need to make owning a vehicle illegal. Let's make not working out illegal, because obesity is killing people, and salt, high blood pressure is killing people. Oh, and lightning, because that kills people. The issue in Portland says, just seems like a perfect setup. Government, let everyone do as they please. Don't prosecute them. Citizens, crime is crazy. Do something. Government, don't worry. We have a new task force. They wear brown shirts to demonstrate authority. We'll call them the SS. Advisor, sir, that doesn't sound good. Hitler and all. Government says, oh, right. Let's call them the ZZ. Right. And and it said that's exactly what I was sort of describing, with a lot less articulate organization than you have here. But yes, right, the people will clamor for a response, and the government will be happy to provide that. The government created the crisis, and then they're going to wait for the citizenry to clamor for a solution, and the government's going to be happy to oblige. And we're going to see the cycle come back around again. And you just heard from Sergeant Bob, right? He says, well, the new officers who are coming up, they're terrible. They're not any good. Why would they be? Because all the good officers said, I'm not going to work there. You treat us like garbage. You think I'm a racist white supremacist. I'm not at all. I've never done anything like that. And so if you don't want my good law enforcement skills in your community, I'll go find a community that does. Bye. And they pick up and go, as they should. If they're not appreciated, they should leave. And they are. And unfortunately, the city is going to have to deal with it. We have chairman of the board is in the house, says, the solution to this problem is right in front of us, so easy. POC are overwhelmingly the victim of gun violence. Therefore, obviously guns are racist and should be canceled. Problem solved. You're welcome. Thank you, chairman of the board. Just cancel the guns. All right. It's very easy. Just cancel them. Just get on Twitter and, make fun of them, boycott them, whatever. Thank you, chairman of the board. All right. We have a couple other ones. Pinky 2 says, wow, really? It's lame. These aren't gun issues. These are parenting issues. Rob, why do politicians do this? Their agenda? Yeah, it's about the guns. They really do not want you to have guns, right? They want you to be very compliant and just follow orders and don't ever step out of line. They'd be very happy if they could achieve that. Fortunately, they've got a long ways to go. Want to Know says the problem is Portland police. They don't have body cams. Antifa takes private cameras from people forcibly, blocked roads, pulled people from vehicles. I wouldn't want to work and be multiply assaulted, and I can't film, and if it was an officer, and the ADA won't prosecute. Hardesty Council won't fund nothing. Portland rated number 10. Remember, that's from Want to Know. Good to see you, Want to Know. And we also have Sergeant Bob is in the house, says, oh my, stopping black and Hispanics in high crime areas when those groups do shootings. Better go stop the white kids in the yuppie areas. Make statistics look good, and the shots continue to ring out elsewhere. Yeah. So that's from Sergeant Bob, right? The point being, sorry that the anti-gun violence task force was so racist, stopping people from shooting each other in these different areas. It was 52% African Americans. They were very upset about that. And how many African American lives did they save by stopping those shootings from taking place? Now they're not stopping the shootings from taking place. Homicides are up through the roof. What communities do you think are more impacted here? Is it the white yuppies, like Sergeant Bob classified them? Probably not. It's probably the other communities. And so who's the bigger racist here? Is it the people who are enforcing the law to prevent people from shooting other people of color? How are they more racist than the city council that says, no, we're going to pull that law enforcement out and just let those people just keep shooting each other so that as a result of this, there are less racist police officers out on the streets and there's more dead black people because you have some boneheaded liberal politicians out there who are trying to do good. And as a result, they defund the only unit in Portland that was actually stopping people of color from getting shot and killed. And they're the racists. It is so asinine, folks. The city's just going to continue to crumble under leadership like this. It's got to start with new leadership, and it's probably not going to, because I know the demographics there in Seattle and in Washington and in Portland and in Oregon, and they are not changing. It's going to be this for the foreseeable future, which I think is why Sergeant Bob said, strap up and get out of there. We have Jeremy Matreed is here. Good to see you, Jeremy. Sliding in here at the end says, Rob, hope you had a great weekend. Been staying the course and ramping up for the upcoming training. Love it. Thanks for the encouragement to take the tough road. Good things are coming, Jeremy. You're right. They are. Proud of you, man. Keep going. Stay strong. Keep grinding on. And you're right. Good things will continue to come on. And thanks for squeezing a question in here. Good to see you. Want to Know says, oh, that's the interview. So he's correcting a last question here. And Sweet Potato, Potato is in the house, says, but who's going to arrest all the people who refuse the jab if there's no police? That's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question. All those COVID crimes that we've been seeing, trespass, and, oh, you didn't tell me you were vaccinated and all this stuff, or not vaccinated. All right, good questions. Let's see what else we've got going on. I think that was it for the questions, my friends. So let's give some shout outs over on watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We got Tremendous in the house. Pinky 2, no doubt, is there. I see Joe Snow in there. Baranski's over here. We got Vincentius Prime is in the house, along with Want to Know and some others. Let's see who's over on YouTube. We've got Zulu Zeitz in the house. We've got Rebecca Caraway's here. Anita Reason's here, along with K Bean. Holy F Moly, my S. What a name on that one. Wow. All right. That's a good name. Good to see you in the community. We've got Kenneth Reeder and many others. And all of those questions came over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And I want to welcome people who signed up last week. Big welcomes to Janoid. We got Sweet Potato is in here, along with Jay Fizzle, CD Gorley, Truman HW, and Sif Thea. And then I will certainly update this slide for tomorrow with all of the new people who signed up over the weekend. I see you out there. I have not forgotten about you. I was just skidding in here at the last minute. We are going to be scheduled and queued up. It's August already. Can you believe it's August? We have our monthly locals meetup coming via Zoom on August 28th, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern time. Available if you're a supporter at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And I'm excited about it. I think that's going to be our fourth one. We get about 35 to 40 people each time. It's a lot of fun, and it's a good reason to be a part of the community. And so I'd invite you to go check us out at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. There's a lot of great people over there, and we appreciate you helping to build a separate platform brick by brick so that we're sort of insulated from some of the limitations on some of these other tech platforms. Really means the world to me. I appreciate all of your support. All right, my friends. Well, that is it for me for the day. I want to thank you so much for being here with us. We're going to be back here same time, same place tomorrow. It's going to be at 4 p.m. Arizona time, 5 p.m. Mountain, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. on the East Coast. And for that one Florida man, everybody else have a tremendous evening. Sleep very well. I will see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.